I decided to visit my wife at her job as CEO, and when I reached the entrance, there was a sign that read, Authorized Personnel Only. When I told the security guard that I was the CEO's husband, he laughed and said, "Sir, I see her husband every day. There he is coming out right now." At first, I thought he was joking, but then I decided to play along. The guard at Meridian Technologies smiled and repeated, "Sir, I see her husband here every day. There he is right now, actually," pointing toward the glass doors. A man in a charcoal Tom Ford suit was walking through the lobby. He looked to be in his early 40s, carrying himself with effortless confidence. An expensive watch caught the afternoon sunlight on his wrist. He was the kind of man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes magazine. The guard called out, "Mr. Sterling, your wife's still in her 3 o'clock meeting. She should be done in about 20 minutes. The man, whose security badge identified him as Frank Sterling, nodded and headed toward the elevators without even noticing me. I stood off to the side holding a takeout bag from Osteria, Lauren's favorite Italian restaurant downtown, while my heart did something strange inside my chest. It wasn't racing. It felt more like it was stopping and starting, like a car engine misfiring. After 28 years of marriage, I had just learned that apparently my wife had another husband at work. As Frank waited for the elevator and scrolled through his phone, every instinct told me to walk over and confront him, to ask him what he thought he was doing calling himself my wife's husband, to demand answers and make a scene. But something held me back. Maybe it was how casually the guard had said it, how certain he sounded, as if everyone already knew except me. So instead, I kept my voice calm and said, "You know what? I think I've got the wrong building. I'm looking for Gerald Pharmaceuticals, not Meridian Tech." The guard looked confused and replied, "You said you were Mrs. Sterling's husband." I quickly answered, "I'm a friend of the family. Gerald's my name. Must have gotten my wires crossed." I forced a laugh and added, "It's been a long day." Then I set the takeout bag on the security desk and said, "Actually, could you make sure Lauren gets this? Just tell her Gerald dropped it off. A family friend." The guard shrugged and said, "Sure thing." I walked out before my legs had a chance to give out beneath me. Lauren and I had been married since 1996. We met when we were both 23 years old, me fresh out of college with an accounting degree, and her finishing her MBA at Northwestern. She was brilliant and ambitious, the kind of person who planned her life in 5-year increments and actually achieved every goal she set. I was always the steady one, the practical one, the guy who managed our finances, kept the house running smoothly, paid the bills, and made sure our retirement accounts stayed funded. Lauren often told me I was her foundation, that she could take risks in her career because she knew I would keep everything stable at home. Her career skyrocketed. She became a director at 30, a vice president at 35, and by 43 she was the CEO of Meridian Technologies, a company specializing in AI-driven logistics software. Over 8 years, she transformed it from a struggling startup into a $200 million business. And I was proud of her. So incredibly proud. I supported every late night at the office, every business trip, and every weekend she spent reviewing financial reports instead of having dinner with me, because that's what you do when you love someone. You support their dreams. We never had children because Lauren never wanted them. She always said kids would derail her career trajectory. I was disappointed at first, but eventually I accepted it because her career was her baby, and I thought I understood that. But now I was sitting alone in my car in the Meridian Technologies parking lot, gripping the steering wheel as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. Frank Sterling, Lauren's vice president of operations. A man I had met exactly once at a company holiday party 2 years earlier. Tall, charismatic, and apparently presented as Lauren's husband every single day. Not her boyfriend, not her partner, her husband. I didn't go home right away because I couldn't bring myself to face the empty house. The same house I had spent the entire day cleaning. The same house where I had already prepared Lauren's favorite lasagna for dinner. Here's the rewritten version in a natural, human tone as a single paragraph while keeping all the original details and meaning intact. The house I had spent all day cleaning was also the place where I had been planning to surprise Lauren with tickets to see Hamilton next month for our anniversary. Instead of going home, I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and sat alone in a corner booth with a black coffee that I never actually drank. At 6:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at those words for a long time. Love you. Did she really love me, or had I become nothing more than the backup plan, the safety net, the man who paid half the mortgage while she lived a completely separate life? I typed out and deleted at least a dozen responses before finally settling on, okay, there's lasagna in the fridge. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and then appeared again before her reply came through. You're the best. See you late tonight. I set my phone face down on the table and tried to breathe. Lauren got home at 11:23 that night. I was sitting in the living room pretending to read a book, though in reality I had been staring at the same page for nearly 3 hours. She walked in, dropped her bag by the door and said, "Hey." She looked tired, her hair slightly messy and her lipstick faded. She asked how my day had been, and I asked her the same thing, somehow managing to sound completely normal, which surprised even me. She said it had been exhausting, with back-to-back meetings all afternoon, a board presentation at 4, and then she and Frank had to review the Q3 projections. She headed into the kitchen and asked if there was any lasagna. I told her it was in the fridge while I listened to the familiar sounds of her moving around the house, the refrigerator opening and closing, the microwave humming, the ordinary noises of my wife living in our home. But I couldn't stop wondering whether it was still our home or whether that had become a lie too. A few minutes later, she returned with a plate of reheated lasagna, sat across from me, and said it was perfect because she was starving. Then, as casually as possible, I mentioned that I had stopped by her office earlier and brought lunch from Osteria. She paused for just a fraction of a second before saying, "I didn't get anything." I told her I had left it with Frank Sterling so he could pass it along. "Oh," she said, taking another bite. She chewed, swallowed, and then added, "He didn't mention it. Maybe it got lost in the shuffle." It was a busy day, and in that moment, I knew she was lying. There was no hesitation, no crack in her story, just a perfectly smooth lie. When I asked how Frank was doing, she smiled and said he was great, the best VP she had ever worked with, and that they were really in sync on everything. I nodded and said, "That's good. It's important to have a strong working relationship." She smiled back with the same smile I had fallen in love with 28 years earlier and thanked me for trying to bring her lunch, saying it was sweet. "Any time," I replied. Then we sat there like a perfectly normal married couple on a Tuesday night, even though nothing felt normal anymore. I waited until she was asleep. Lauren had always been a deep sleeper. Years of caffeine, stress, and adrenaline had taught her how to shut down completely when the day was over. By midnight, she was fast asleep. I quietly walked into her study. The door wasn't locked because why would it be? I was her husband. She trusted me. Her laptop was sitting on the desk, closed but unlocked, and I knew the password. Our wedding date, 061596. My hands shook as I opened it, feeling like a criminal inside my own home. Her email was already open, thousands of messages staring back at me, and I had no idea where to start, so I checked her calendar. At first, everything looked perfectly normal: meetings, board calls, conferences. But then I started noticing patterns. There were entries like dinner with F at 7 p.m. at Il Posto, a romantic Italian restaurant known for candlelit tables and piano music. It wasn't the kind of place people usually chose for a business dinner with a VP. Then there was a weekend retreat at Grand Geneva Resort listed as a women's leadership conference, complete with a $450 per night suite charged to her corporate card. The reservation initially showed 2 rooms, but one had been canceled, leaving a single room for 2 people. My stomach sank. I kept digging and uncovered nearly 3 years' worth of coded dinners, corporate retreats, and business trips, all connected in some way to Frank's name. Eventually, I closed the laptop and stood in the doorway watching Lauren sleep. She looked peaceful, innocent even, while I knew she had been lying to me for years. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 6 years. I worked as a senior accountant at Monroe & Associates, a mid-sized firm in the Loop. It was a stable, predictable job that paid the bills but never made for exciting conversation at dinner parties. Lauren earned 3 times as much as I did, and I had never resented that. Her success was supposed to be our success, or at least that's what I had always believed. I've rewritten it in a more natural, human tone while keeping all the original details and meaning intact, in a single paragraph. After Lauren left for work that morning, kissing my forehead and telling me to feel better, I started searching for answers. I went through every drawer in her study, every file cabinet, and every box in her closet until I finally found something hidden at the back of her jewelry drawer beneath a pile of costume necklaces she never wore. It was a single silver key with no label, but attached to it was a keychain tag with an address. Harborview Apartments, Unit 214. Harborview was a luxury apartment complex in River North that I had driven past countless times. A 30-story building with floor-to-ceiling windows where even a small studio apartment rented for around $2,500 a month. I took the key and drove there. In the parking garage, each parking space was marked with a unit number, and parked in space 214 was a black Mercedes GLE. I immediately recognized it as Frank Sterling's car from the company parking lot. My hands were shaking as I took the elevator to the second floor and found Unit 214. When I inserted the key, it fit perfectly. The moment I stepped inside, I realized this wasn't just some rental property. It was a fully lived-in home. The apartment had hardwood floors, modern furniture, fresh flowers on the coffee table, and the air carried the unmistakable scent of Lauren's perfume, Chanel No. 5, the perfume she reserved for special occasions. On the mantel were photographs of Lauren and Frank together at the beach, at restaurants, and on hiking trails. In every picture, Lauren wasn't wearing her wedding ring. I wandered through the apartment in a daze, noticing 2 sets of dishes in the kitchen and 2 coffee mugs sitting on the counter labeled his and hers. Then I walked into the bedroom, and the reality hit me like a physical blow. There was a large bed dressed with expensive linens, and Lauren's clothes hung in the closet right beside Frank's suits. Her shoes were lined up next to his, as if they had been living together as husband and wife for years. On top of the dresser, I found a folder in Lauren's handwriting labeled Future Plans. Inside were real estate listings for houses in Evanston, Oak Park, and Wilmette, all priced between $800,000 and $1.2 million. She had made notes on them like, good schools nearby, close to Frank's parents, and love the kitchen. There were also travel brochures for Santorini, Tokyo, and New Zealand, marked as dream honeymoon destinations. Beneath those papers were legal documents and divorce consultation summaries dated 18 months earlier. They showed that Lauren had met with 3 different divorce attorneys and had been carefully planning everything. Her notes were cold and clinical, outlining strategies for framing the divorce as irreconcilable differences. She had written comments about my supposed lack of ambition and emotional distance and documented what she considered failures to support her career growth, as if our entire marriage had been converted into evidence against me. Page after page contained examples of ordinary moments twisted into faults. Me asking her to skip work events occasionally, me not wanting to spend dinner discussing corporate strategy, me being satisfied with my accounting career. Every normal aspect of our marriage had been reframed into a case against me. The most recent note, dated just 3 weeks earlier, laid out a detailed timeline. File for divorce by January 2025, finalize it by June, and marry F by Christmas 2025. It was all scheduled and planned, as if my replacement had already been booked into her future while she was secretly living part of that future with him in the home they had built together. I was nothing more than an obstacle standing in the way. I photographed everything, every page, every document, every photo. Then I sat on their couch in their apartment, trying to process the fact that my 28-year marriage had probably been a lie for at least 3 years. Eventually, I walked back to my car and started driving without any destination in mind. Hours passed until my phone rang at 3:47 p.m. It was Lauren. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 4:15 and again at 4:32. Then came a series of text messages asking where I was and whether I was feeling better. Finally, at 6 p.m., I pulled into a parking lot and listened to her voicemails. Her voice sounded soft and worried as she said she hoped I was okay and asked me to call her back. At one point, she even said she was considering calling local hospitals. It all sounded so sincere, so convincing, like genuine concern. That's when I realized how good she was at this, really good. When I finally called her back, she answered immediately and said, "Oh, thank God. Where have you been?" I was so worried. I told her I had just been driving around and needed some time to clear my head. She said she had been scared and asked if I was coming home. I told her yes, I'd be there soon. "Good," she said, "because I left work early and I'm picking up Thai food on the way home. It was my favorite. I've rewritten it in a natural, human tone while keeping all the original details and meaning intact, in a single paragraph. And she still remembered my favorite food. She was still paying attention to the small details, still pretending to care. Sounds good. Love you," she said. "Yeah, you too," I replied before quickly ending the call, so she wouldn't hear the crack in my voice. That night, we sat at our dining room table eating Thai food while Lauren talked about her day. There had been some client crisis, a difficult board member, the usual corporate drama. I nodded in all the right places and said the things a supportive husband was supposed to say. All the while, I knew that in just a few months she planned to divorce me and marry Frank Sterling. After dinner, she suggested we watch a movie. So we sat together on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder the way it had 1,000 times before. The only difference was that now I could smell her expensive perfume, and I knew she had been at that apartment earlier that day, living her other life with her other husband. During a quiet moment in the movie, she looked at me and said, "Gerald." "Yeah," I answered. "Are we okay? You seem distant." Hearing that word hit me hard because it was the exact same word she had written in her notes as part of her case against me. "I'm fine," I said, "just still not feeling great." "Okay," she replied, squeezing my hand and telling me to let her know if I needed anything. I told her I would. We finished the movie, went to bed, and she fell asleep almost immediately, curled on her side as usual. I stayed awake until 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. The following morning, I called in sick again. Lauren left the house at 7:15 a.m., kissed my forehead, and told me to get some rest. The second she was gone, I went straight back to her study. I had been an accountant for 22 years, and I knew exactly how to spot financial irregularities. Once I knew what I was looking for, the pattern became obvious. Our joint checking account showed regular deposits from both of our salaries. Mine was about $6,200 a month after taxes, while Lauren's was roughly $11,000. Our combined monthly expenses, including the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and insurance, came to around $8,500. That meant we should have been saving about $8,700 every month. Over 3 years, that should have added up to more than $300,000 in savings. Instead, our savings account only contained $47,000. So I started looking for where the missing money had gone. I pulled up Lauren's personal credit card account, the one she always claimed was used only for reimbursable business expenses. The statements told a very different story. Harborview Apartments showed a monthly rent payment of $3,200 for 3 years, totaling $152,200. There were furniture purchases totaling $24,000 from West Elm, Pottery Barn, and Crate and Barrel. Travel expenses to luxury destinations added up to another $31,000. Then there were hundreds of charges from expensive restaurants. Every transaction pointed toward the same thing, her secret life. A secret life funded with money from our shared finances, my money. While I had been driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic and eating leftovers, she had been living with Frank Sterling in a luxury apartment that cost $3,200 a month, using income that we had earned together. I documented everything. I downloaded 3 years of bank statements, credit card records, and investment transfer histories. Then I shifted my focus to Meridian Technologies' corporate filings, which was where my accounting experience really became valuable. I knew how to read numbers and uncover the story hidden behind them. And the story I found was disturbing. Lauren appeared to be quietly restructuring the company without proper board approval in order to position Frank as her eventual successor. Resources were being shifted into his department. He was being handed control of key accounts. She was effectively preparing him for a chief operating officer role that didn't officially exist yet. On the surface, it looked like she was mentoring a rising executive. In reality, she appeared to be redirecting company resources in ways that benefited her personal relationship instead of the company's shareholders. It looked like serious misconduct. I took screenshots, organized everything into folders, and built a detailed timeline. Then I called Richard Morrison, the chairman of Meridian Technologies board. I had met him twice before at company events. He was a retired hedge fund manager in his late 60s, sharp, direct, and not the kind of man who wasted time. When he answered, I introduced myself. Gerald Hartman, Lauren's husband. We met at the company holiday party 2 years ago. He said he remembered me and asked how we were doing. I told him Lauren was fine, but that I was calling because I had concerns about the company. There was a brief pause. Then I explained that the concerns involved unauthorized restructuring and the misuse of company resources and asked if he would be willing to meet. Another, longer pause followed. Finally, he agreed. I told him I could be at his office within 2 hours. He informed me that he worked from home these days and said he would send me the address. I've rewritten it in a more natural, human tone while keeping all the original details and meaning intact, in a single paragraph. Richard Morrison arrived exactly at 2 p.m. He was tall, silver-haired, and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. I offered him a cup of coffee, which he accepted, and we sat down in my living room. The same room where Lauren and I had spent years watching movies, celebrating anniversaries, and building what I had always believed was a life together. Now it felt more like a stage set in a story I never realized I was part of. Richard got straight to the point. "Show me what you've got," he said. I opened my laptop and walked him through everything: the apartment, the photographs, the divorce planning documents, and the corporate restructuring. With each new detail, his expression darkened. By the time I finished, he muttered, "Jesus Christ." When he reviewed the financial records, he looked up and asked whether Lauren had been redirecting capital expenditure budgets without board approval. I told him that, as far as I could determine, she had, and that the changes specifically benefited Frank Sterling's department. "Why would she do that?" he asked. In response, I opened the folder containing the photographs from the apartment. His jaw tightened as he studied them. "Are they having an affair?" he asked. "More than that," I replied. "They're living together part-time. She's planning to divorce me, marry him, and position him to take over the company." He immediately called it a massive conflict of interest and reminded me that Lauren had a fiduciary duty to both the board and the shareholders. Then he stopped, ran a hand through his hair, and asked whether I had copies of everything. I handed him a USB drive containing the bank records, corporate filings, photographs, and the complete timeline. He looked at it for a moment and said he needed to call an emergency board meeting. "I figured," I replied. He stood up and said, "Gerald, I'm sorry for what she's done to you personally, but thank you. If this had continued much longer, the damage to the company could have been catastrophic." I told him I wasn't doing it for revenge, although even I knew that wasn't completely true. "I'm doing it because it's the truth," I said, "and I'm done pretending not to see what's right in front of me." We shook hands before he left, and he promised he'd be in touch. Lauren came home at 6:15 that evening, much earlier than usual. I was standing in the kitchen making chicken stir-fry, and the moment she walked through the door, I knew the board meeting had already been set in motion. Her face was tense, and her voice shook with anger as she said, "You son of a bitch, you called Richard Morrison? My own husband is trying to destroy my career." I kept stirring the food and didn't even turn around. "I only shared information the board should have," I said calmly. "Information?" she snapped. "You showed him private photos. You went through my personal files." I finally turned toward her and replied, "Your personal files in our shared apartment. Your personal life funded by our joint account." She stormed across the room, grabbed my arm, and spun me around. "This is different," she said. "This is my professional reputation." I looked at her and asked, "And sleeping with your VP while restructuring the company to personally benefit him, that's professional?" The color drained from her face. After a long moment, she quietly asked, "What do you want? Money? The house?" I shook my head. I don't want anything from you. You put all of this in motion 3 years ago. I'm just refusing to keep playing the fool while you carry out your plan." "What plan?" she asked. In response, I showed her the photographs and the folder labeled future plans. "This plan," I said. "The one where you divorce me by January, marry Frank by Christmas, and start your new life in Evanston." She slowly sank into a chair and asked how I had found it. "I found the key to your other life," I told her. Then I looked at her and said, 28 years, Lauren. I supported every decision you made, every late night, every sacrifice, because I thought we were building something together." "We were," she said softly, but I shook my head. "No, you were building an exit strategy, and I was funding it." Tears started running down her face. Real tears, and she said she was sorry and that she had never meant for things to happen this way. "How did you mean for it to happen?" I asked. "Before the divorce filing or after?" She didn't answer. The silence told me everything I needed to know. I turned off the stove, picked up my keys, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "A hotel," I said, "and I'll have divorce papers drawn up by Monday." She told me to wait, but I kept walking. There was nothing left to discuss. She had made her choice years ago. I was only just catching up. I've rewritten it in a natural, human tone while keeping all the original details and meaning intact, in a single paragraph. I filed for divorce that Monday and hired Jennifer Kowalski, a family law attorney with 23 years of experience. After reviewing everything, she told me it was one of the clearest cases of marital misconduct she had ever seen. She pointed to the secret apartment, the financial deception, and the detailed timeline Lauren had created, and said I was likely to do very well in the divorce proceedings. But I told her I didn't care about doing well. I just wanted out. Jennifer said I should care because this was a case of financial infidelity, and Illinois law took that very seriously. That same afternoon, the board meeting took place. I wasn't there, but Richard called me at 5:47 p.m. with the results. Frank Sterling had been terminated effective immediately, and Lauren had been placed on administrative probation. Her authority within the company had been significantly restricted pending a full investigation. The restructuring she had put in place was being reversed, and a forensic accountant had been hired to conduct a complete audit. Richard explained that if investigators found evidence of fiduciary violations or fraud, Lauren could be facing criminal charges, not just termination. He summed it up by saying, "Jesus, she built this house of cards, Gerald. You just knocked it down." Later that night, while I was sitting in a Marriott hotel near O'Hare eating Chinese takeout and watching ESPN, Lauren called me. She was crying. "You've destroyed everything," she said. She told me Frank had lost his job. The board was investigating her, and her career was effectively over. Then she asked how I could do this to her. I answered in a cold voice, "How could I do this? You spent 3 years planning my replacement. You stole $250,000 from our joint account to fund your affair, and you committed corporate fraud to benefit your lover. And you're asking how I could do this?" She said she had been planning to tell me. "When?" I asked. "After you filed for divorce? After you married Frank by Christmas like you planned?" There was a long silence. Then she quietly asked, "You knew about that?" She began begging me to stop, insisting we could still fix everything. She promised she would end things with Frank, go to counseling, do whatever it took. But I reminded her that Frank had already lost his job because of her actions, and now she was ready to abandon him too. I asked whether she could at least stay consistent about who she chose to betray. "That's not fair," she said. I laughed bitterly. "Fair? You spent 28 years building my trust so you could execute the perfect betrayal. You documented every argument as evidence against me. You built a legal case while I was cooking dinner, doing laundry, and supporting your career." When she said, "I loved you," I told her the truth as I saw it. "No, you loved what I provided. Stability, financial security, a foundation while you built your empire. The moment you found someone who fit your life better, you started planning to trade me in." She insisted it wasn't like that, but I told her it was exactly like that. And the worst part wasn't even the affair. The worst part was that she had planned to make me the villain. She had written notes about my lack of ambition, my emotional distance, and my supposed failure to support her career so she could justify everything she had done. Through tears, she asked whether 28 years together meant nothing. I told her they did, but in the past tense. Then I said she had killed it the moment she picked up the key to apartment 214. After that, I hung up and blocked her number when she tried calling 6 more times. The divorce lasted 4 months. At first, she fought it, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. In the settlement, I kept the house, while she kept her car and her badly damaged reputation. The board's investigation ultimately concluded that she had violated her fiduciary duty by restructuring the company for the benefit of her personal relationship, and she was forced to resign in March 2025. There was no severance package, no payout, just a resignation and an exit. Frank Sterling later sued Lauren and Meridian Technologies for wrongful termination, but the lawsuit was dismissed. An affair with your CEO combined with unauthorized restructuring was not considered protected conduct. The last thing I heard was that Frank and Lauren broke up 3 months after everything fell apart. Frank blamed Lauren for destroying his career, while Lauren blamed Frank for not being worth the sacrifice. Neither of them accepted responsibility for what had happened. In June, I sold the house because it held too many memories and too many ghosts. I bought a smaller condo in Lakeview, a place that belonged entirely to me. I started dating again in August, though nothing serious. Mostly, I was learning how to trust again. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chan, a clinical psychologist with 18 years of experience, says that's completely normal. She says betrayal trauma takes time to heal and that there's no reason to rush the process. So I'm not rushing anything anymore. I'm taking life one day at a time, one choice at a time, and one truth at a time. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Lauren unexpectedly at Whole Foods while she was standing in the produce section looking at organic vegetables. I've rewritten it in a natural, human tone while keeping all the original details and meaning intact, in a single paragraph. She looked thinner than I remembered and noticeably tired. The moment our eyes met, she froze. I gave her a small nod and kept walking. She didn't try to stop me or follow me. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should feel sorry for her after everything she had lost. Her career, her relationship, and her reputation. But then I remembered apartment 214. I remembered the folder labeled Future Plans. I remembered the cold, calculated notes she had written while building a case against me. And just like that, any sympathy disappeared. I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. I just felt free. 2 years after everything fell apart, I received a message on LinkedIn from Frank Sterling. It read, "I know you have no reason to talk to me, but I wanted to apologize for everything. I knew she was married. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I convinced myself the marriage was already over, that we were in love, and that somehow justified everything. Didn't. You deserved better. So did everyone at Meridian. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time before closing it without replying because some apologies arrived too late to matter. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness, and sometimes the best response to someone who helped destroy your life is silence. People occasionally ask whether I regret how I handled everything, whether I should have confronted Lauren privately or given her a chance to explain herself. The answer is no. She had 3 years to explain. 3 years to tell the truth. 3 years to choose our marriage instead of her affair. But she chose Frank. She chose the apartment. She chose the future she was building without me. All I did was make sure everyone else knew what she had chosen. 3 years after the divorce, I'm sitting in my condo on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading the news when my phone buzzes with a text from my girlfriend, Amy. I met her in a bookstore. She knows my entire history and chose me anyway. Her message says, "Brunch at 11 o'clock? I'm thinking that French place you love." I smile and text back, "Perfect. See you there." Then I set my phone down and look out toward Lake Michigan. The water is gray and choppy beneath the wind. Behind me, my home is quiet, small, and honest. There are no secret apartments, no hidden lives, and no carefully constructed lies. There is only the truth, simple, painful, and free. And that's enough. More than enough. That's everything.